The long grind that is 162 games. It's about to begin. Frank Klose will be there all along the way for 97.3 ESPN.com, and he joins us with a full preview of this 2017 edition of the Philadelphia Phillies. Soup to nuts here, PT, with Frank, as we take a look at the Philadelphia Phillies 2017 edition. Frank, welcome back for another year of Phillies baseball, pal.
How are you, gentlemen?
We're doing really well as the baseball season here kind of gets that spring feeling for us here. But realistically, get your take on this. It just feels like there is not a lot of buzz around this team. Is it one that because people kind of understand, are they wrong in not being all that excited? Is there more excitement than maybe I feel? What is your take on the state of where the Phillies currently are with their fan base?
I think the Phillies fans are being patient here. I think they do understand what's going on in terms of the rebuild, but I think at the same time, a lot of them do get excited about some of the young Phillies players, and I can certainly say a lot of them were in tune over the last few years as they watched the Phillies minor league teams play very well, and those who paid attention to those teams, I think they're really excited about the likes of Brock Stassi making the team and seeing Tommy Joseph excel in the major leagues like he did last year. So I think people have been tuned in. Maybe they've been tuned in quietly, but I think they know that something is going to break soon, that this team will have a shot to be in contention really soon. I don't think they're – I think we also, in terms of how they're reacting, not loudly, I don't think they're loudly negative either. So I think, they're kind of in that nice little middle where they're kind of patient, but not at the same time freaking out either way.
Yeah, well, it seems that it's interesting because this team really hasn't won for about 5 years. They really haven't been relevant. They were the worst team in baseball 2 seasons ago. They've had a decline every year from an 81 season and have progressively gone downwards. And it seemed that for a time there, Frank, they were with the Eagles. I mean, they were 1-1A. They had really taken over this town as maybe the number one team. And it seems like that drop-off has been just massive. Citizens Bank Park had sellout after sellout. Now you see half-empty building. Can they recapture that fan base?
I think so. I think the real problem for that fan base dropping off was not 2012 when they didn't make the playoffs. I don't think it is the seasons that we've had this year, last year. I think it was 2013 and 2014 where it seemed to be like the Phillies were fooling themselves and thinking that they could compete, whereas the fan base was too smart to and did not believe that the Phillies could compete. So I think that really kind of deflated the balloon. I think if the Phillies had started a rebuild perhaps in 2012 a little bit stronger, you remember they traded away Shane Victorino and Hunter Pence. I think if they went all in and did an all-in rebuild then, things might be a little bit different right now.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. The Phillies open the season up against the Cincinnati Reds. Let's take a look at this team here, Frank. Let's start off, with Tommy Joseph. Was a guy that last year wasn't even on the radar. They basically, pulled him up out of necessity, and now he's your starting first baseman for this team here. Was a guy that they had high hopes for. Do you think Tommy Joseph is a potential breakout player?
I don't think that we know totally what Tommy Joseph is. Now, the Phillies had the luxury of bringing him along last year to sort of supplement a left-handed first baseman in Ryan Howard. Now, Joseph didn't really play much against the tough right-handed hitters. I think the Phillies purposely tried to put him in those positions where he had the best chance to succeed. So I think this year is going to actually be a pretty big test for Joseph because the team doesn't really know how he's going to hit against tough right-handed pitchers. If you look at his splits from 2016 against right-handed pitchers, he batted just .248, which isn't terrible. Now, he did hit 14 of his 21 home runs against those right-handed pitchers. But you want to see a better sample size than that. Now, he did have 226 at-bats against right-handed pitchers last year, which is a decent enough sample size, but I think we need to see how he does over the scope of a full season before that you can really draw any conclusions about how Joseph is going to do. You know, his 773 OPS was much less than his 912 against left-handed hitters. So we really need to see if Tommy Joseph is either a platoon player or if Tommy Joseph is indeed a starter. And that's going to be his story to tell. If Joseph takes advantage of those at-bats against right-handed pitching that he's going to get, I mean, the Phillies are going to give him full opportunity to show that he can start not just against left-handed pitchers, but against right-handed pitchers. And if he seizes that opportunity, and if he shows that he can hit, well, then he can build himself into one of those stable pieces for the future. So I don't think there are any conclusions drawn about Joseph yet, other than he did very well last season against left-handed pitchers. And so let's see what he does against the righties.
Frank, how about over at second base where Cesar Hernandez starts and he also hits leadoff? Is he a guy who can be a long-term piece and maybe a little bit of a surprise?
I think he has been a bit of a surprise last year. You know, the sad part about Cesar Hernandez is he was blocked by Chase Utley for so long. He had that one period where they let him start in center field at the end of 2013, and really they just kind of threw him out in center field and said, let's see if you can play center field when Ben Revere was out with an injury. And he kind of showed then that he could get on base, or he had the tools to get on base, but then he went right back to being blocked by Chase Utley. And last year was his first opportunity, and I think that he really learned a lot as the season went on, not just how to play once in a while, but to sustain success as he went on. And I think his on-base percentage was something that really, really helped the club. And really, you know, if you look back to opening day of last year, the Phillies had him batting seventh. And, you know, at the end of last year and even going into this year, he's going to be a leadoff hitter because he's shown he can get on base. So Hernandez was somebody that was kind of kicked around as a possible trade piece in the offseason, mainly because the Phillies have some options down the line at second base. And you know, even right now, Howie Kendrick can slide into that role if the Phillies need to throw him in second base anytime. So they have some options, but, you know, the question still remains if he's a long-term piece or not. I think the Phillies do like some of the second basemen in their system, including Jesse Valentin and Scott Kingery, you know, that are both going to start the year in the minor leagues. So they have more time to develop. And Cesar Hernandez, if he can show that he can get on base at that high clip like he did last year, Phillies might consider keeping him around because there's not a whole lot of players that get on base the way they did 15 years ago.
Frank Klose with us, our 97.3 ESPN Phillies Insider, talking a little Phillies baseball as they start the season on Monday in Cincy. At short, Frank, Freddy Galvis, would you say that he's on borrowed time, or can he hold off J.P. Crawford all season?
I think Freddy Galvis is the perfect shortstop to have in the major leagues if you have a top prospect shortstop down in the minor leagues. Freddy Galvis is going to give you very, very solid defense. As you saw last year, he could pop you some home runs. He's not going to hit for high average. He's not going to get on base a lot. But every once in a while, he has a really big hit. So I think he's somebody that doesn't necessarily block Crawford from coming up, but rather he's the type of guy who you can start at shortstop, not feel terrible about it. And when Crawford makes a statement in the minor league that he's ready to come up, then Galvis, you know, is not going to block him from doing so. Galvis is a switch hitter who, you know, the Phillies have played him in the outfield. They played him at third base. They played him at second base. You know, he could be a very valuable utility player on a good team. So this might not be the end of the Freddy Galvis story with the Phillies, but at the same time, you know, he's not the type that's going to keep J.P. Crawford in the minors if it's time for him to come up.
Hey, Frank, over at third, it's Franco, and it's funny how fast these guys' careers move, but he was the young guy that everyone was excited about. Here he is now in year number 3. How big of a season is this for Franco?
This is a big one. I think last year he really kind of took too much pressure onto himself and felt that he had to be the total solution, you know, in that Phillies lineup last year. And let's face it, there were plenty of times last year that he didn't have a lot of help, and Cedric Hunter had to be his protection in the lineup, and you know, David Lowe passing through, Manny Burris getting all this playing time. So sometimes in a young player like that, he feels like he has to do too much. And hopefully that's what the story was with Franco last year. Now, the Phillies got Maikel Saunders pretty much to be the left-handed bat that protects Franco in the lineup. And hopefully with that balance there, and he's probably going to hit behind Odubel Herrera. So you're looking at a situation where you have another righty bat who's going to be behind Saunders and Tommy Joseph. And so Franco, Saunders, Joseph is a lot better than what he had to work with last year. So with Odubel Herrera probably batting third and getting on base in front of him, I think this should be a lot smoother a year for Maikel Franco, and he should feel like he's one among many rather than having to be the guy. So I would expect Franco's numbers to improve a little bit going into 2017.
Out in the outfield, Frank, which was abysmal last year, Tyler Goodell started. They just designated him for assignment today, so that shows you how different this outfield situation is going to look. They went out and got Howie Kendrick, a veteran, and he's going to play left field when he's been primarily a second baseman. He's been kind of a utility guy in recent years, but seemingly on the downward spiral here. But does he have a comeback year left in him?
I think he's going to be an effective player for the Phillies and whoever trades for him later in the season. Howie Kendrick is a very professional hitter. The Phillies plan to bat him second. And in that role, the hope is that Cesar Hernandez is getting on base as well as he did last year. And he'll be the type of guy that can easily move Hernandez, up to second base. He's very good with the bat. Like, for example, he can hit a ball to the opposite side to let the runner advance. I could definitely see Howie Kendrick filling that type of role. He's not the power outfielder, but he does fill a very important function for the Phillies. And I think, too, somebody like him is going to help some of the younger players with their approach to the plate. So the Phillies got him not just to be trade bait or to, fill a hole, but kind of that leadership that somebody like Kendrick who is going to bring, who has a very impressive resume coming, mostly with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. He had many years there where he was a very solid, consistent player at the plate. And a veteran like Kendrick is going to be a really good role model for other players. And at the same time, we're not looking at David Lowe, Manny Burris, Peter Borges, and Cedric Hunter kind of in this rotation that they had last year.
That's an awful group of names, by the way.
Yeah, they didn't do so well.
Hey, Frank, we know that Odubel Herrera, here's a nice name. We know Odubel Herrera got an extension. Is he the guy the Phillies are hoping to build around? And do you see him as the leader of this Phillies clubhouse?
I don't know if I would call him the leader per se, but he's definitely a fiery, energetic player who's got a lot of talent that I think they're hoping will be contagious. Sometimes you need somebody like that who can really rile everybody up in that regard. He's going to be batting third this year, mainly out of necessity. Probably he could project to be a one or two hitter down the line, but he's going to bat third with the idea that he's going to get on base enough to basically be there for the middle of the order. And Maikel Franco, the likes of Maikel Franco, Michael Saunders, Tommy Joseph can come up and then knock him in. So I think we're going to see a comparable year as we saw last year. Last year he came out of the chute doing very well in terms of walks and plate discipline, and then he sort of got back into his middle ground where he wasn't walking as much, but he's not going to have to be the leadoff hitter this year like they thought he would be last year. So I think he'll get swing his bat a little bit more, and I could see him as being somebody who ends up scoring a lot of runs still because he's going to be in that third position. You want to put your best pure hitter in the third position, which I don't think is his ideal place, but I think it'll do well for the Phillies this season. And then in later years when the Kendricks are out of the picture, maybe he slides back up to two and the rest of that lineup follows him. But I could see him batting 300 again. I think that's a pretty consistent number for him and what we've seen from him so far. And if he can get on base at a 300 clip, that bodes very well for the lineup as a whole.
And no matter what, he should be the leader in bat flips. I saw him do a flip the other day when he drew a walk. He already had the bat flip going in spring training.
Well, let's just hope that he doesn't get plunked one too many times for doing that. So that doesn't always rub the competition the right way.
Yeah, and let's move over to right with Saunders, where you kind of mentioned his role here, but do you see him being like a full-time guy, or do you see Aaron Altair, and him having like a full-time, platoon out there?
Well, the Phillies really needed a left-handed bat in the middle of that lineup. Now, the Phillies have some people in the minor leagues that can fill that role long term. So the moment Nick Williams comes up, for example, if he can play really well, he's going to be that guy. But right now, you really wanted a left-handed bat in the middle of that lineup, because before they acquired Saunders, you kind of looked at the lineup as a whole, and it just didn't seem balanced. So Saunders is going to be somebody who's going to kind of fill that role. He might get some respites against some tough left-handed pitchers. I think that's where Aaron Altair is going to play the most. I don't think they're going to go with a straight platoon, but certainly the Phillies have a lot more depth now that they can put Aaron Altair in the lineup and feel very comfortable about it. I mean, let's face it, too. I mean, Odubel Herrera could also get a day off against a tough left-handed hitter. So Aaron Altair is going to probably play a lot. I would. My best guess is that he plays at every game against the lefty, filling in for somebody. But Saunders is somebody who should hit you a good amount of home runs. A lot of people feel like his bat profiles well for Citizens Bank Park, to the right field fence. So I think you'll see 20 home runs out of him. He'll be a very good player. He's not a superstar. He did make the All-Star team last year. But I guess the key for Saunders is if he can kind of sustain for a whole season the stretch that he had at the beginning of last season. But I think the Phillies can manage him with Altair so that he doesn't necessarily drop off, because he won't have to face left-handed hitters as often.
Frank, Carlos Ruiz, the last member of that 2008 World Series winning team, he is now gone. So what's the catching situation look like?
Oh, well, this is the first time since 2000 that 2008 member will be on the team.
Yeah, very, very different era of Philadelphia baseball, huh? So Cameron Rupp, he's going to get to be the starter. You kind of know going into the season that Jorge Alfaro projects to be the long-term solution at the catching position. I think that Andrew Knapp, he essentially made the team because he was on the 40-man roster. Although he did come around towards the end of spring training. He got off to a pretty rough start with his bat. I think long-term, Knapp is too good with his bat. I think he's going to hit in the major league, probably not in a starting role. But the fact that the Phillies used him at first base some, there was some talk before. They didn't do it this year, but there was some talk he could play some outfield down the line. So Knapp might be the type as a switch hitter that could stick around on the major league roster for many years and fill perhaps a couple roles. But I think Alfaro's is the one who's going to get the job long term, and Cameron Rupp is not a bad player to have until then. Rupp also has his moments where he plays very, very well, and I think you're going to see that he's going to be very good with the young pitching staff, even though he's not all that old himself. But I think Rupp's a good player to have around, and he's somebody that I think when Alfaro is banging down the door and showing that it's time for him to make the major leagues, I think they could have no problem trading somebody like Rupp, because there's always a need for solid catching in the major leagues. But, he's a career 240 hitter. He's going to hit about 250. He's going to hit you some home runs here and there. He had 16 last year, so certainly not terrible. But I think right now what they care more about is that he works with the pitchers well. And Knapp, he's going to get some starts too. Knapp will probably play against some of the tougher right-hand pitchers. They'll probably choose to make Rupp's days off against the righties, and Knapp will be able to bat left-handed against some of them. But I think if you want to say compare it to last year, maybe a slight decline at the catching position, without the veteran Chooch, but I still think it's decent enough for what the Phillies are trying to do right now.
All right. One strong spot here is the rotation, we think, right? Jeremy Hellickson will be the opening day starter. While he doesn't jump off the page, they're very solid 1 through 5.
Yeah, I would agree with that very much. Now, if you look to last season's opening day rotation, the Phillies began with Hellickson. They had Velasquez. They had Nola. They had Eichhoff. And then they also had Charlie Morton, who 4 starts into the season, if you might remember, he was running to first base. Boom, he's out for the season. So what's different this year is, even though 4 of those pitchers are the same, is that down at AAA, you have Jake Thompson, who could come up if you need to. You have Zach Eflin down there who can come up when you need him. And really, if you get further down than that, they still have Mark Appel, they still have Ben Lively, they still have Nick Pivetta. So you don't really feel squeezed like you did last year because Zach Eflin in a lot of ways got pulled up to the major leagues a little bit too soon. Now, I did see him pitch a nice complete game shutout in Pittsburgh at one point, but if you remember, Eflin came in and got rocked almost immediately at first start. So I think that the depth beyond the 5 that are on the opening day roster is so much stronger, and that's going to create a lot more stability for the Phillies because that first couple months of the season when they were playing pretty well, it was because they had pretty much stability in the rotation. But as we saw, as you got down towards the end of the year, they were desperate. Alec Asher, I thought he was just going to be sent home for the year after his PED suspension, and they ended up having to give starts to Asher. So I don't think that they have to worry about giving anybody a premature start this year. And it's a shame for Jake Thompson and Zach Eflin that, they're not in the major leagues right now, but the chances are they will be soon. If they make some trades at the deadline, they'll be up. If there's an injury, they'll be up. And either scenario, you don't feel like the Phillies are venturing into murky territory because they don't have anybody that can give them a major league start.
Hey, Frank, how about the bullpen where Jemar Gomez will close, but is this a deeper, more versatile bullpen than the one they had last year, which essentially was about 2 guys getting called on every single night, it seemed like, Hector Neris and Jemar Gomez?
Well, let me run down this list for you. Last year, besides Gomez and Neris, you had David Hernandez, James Russell, Daniel Stumpf, Dalier Hinojosa, and Brett Oberholzer as the rest of your bullpen. So compare that to what they have now, which is Neris and Gomez, both of whom, especially Neris, he's got more seasoning now, and I think you feel a lot more comfortable with what he can do. But they have veterans Pat Neshek, they have Joaquin Benoit, they have Eduardo Ramos, who kind of showed last year he's got a lot of tools, and he's able to develop a little bit more. And then on the left side, you have Yoeli Rodriguez, you have Adam Morgan, and I think you feel a lot better with that group than you did starting last season. Where, if you remember, the last week of last year's opening week was just brutal because no matter how well the starters pitched, the bullpen came in and coughed up every single game. I don't know if you remember those first 4 games, but the Phillies were making roster moves.
It's what got Gomez the job, right? Gomez wasn't the closer. Everyone was just so bad that he got it by default because he actually closed the game out.
Right, yeah. If you remember the first game, Gomez came in the 7th to relieve Hellickson, who pitched a nice 6th. And it was a nice steady 7th inning. And, all hell broke loose from there. So I think they realized, hey, look, Gomez is very steady. Every 3 innings he pitches, he's going to give up 1 earned run. That's basically Gomez's track record. So if you put him in the 9th inning and he doesn't have any temperament issues with the 9th inning, which he does not, he's going to save you some games. It's just simple mathematics because he's very even-keeled. Now, he did show some oil leaking at the end of the year, but as you said, they just overused Gomez and Neris. And I think this year they can treat their arms a little bit better by not overusing them because you don't feel like the whole roof's going to cave in when you put in somebody like Benoit or Neshek, who are seasoned major league veterans.
All right, Frank Klose is with us here. Frank, can you hang and do another segment with us? We want to get some more opinions on the lineup and how everything's going to go. Some other numbers for the year for our Phillies preview here with Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN.com. So we'll put him on hold and bring him back into the conversation on the other side. What does the lineup look like? What's the rotation look like? Who are the most tradable guys? Who will be the first prospect up? We got all those questions for Frank in our Phillies preview next. Our look at the Phillies, Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN.com. At Frank Klose, he's with us every Tuesday for the Phillies mailbag. And you can get your mailbag questions answered by Frank on our website, 97.3 ESPN.com. At Frank Klose with a K on Twitter. Well, we went around the diamond, looked at the rotation, but we still have more questions in this 2017 look at the Philadelphia Phillies. Frank Klose is back to answer those questions with us now as the Phillies get ready to take on the Reds for opening day. And Frank, All right, lineup. What are we looking at lineup-wise here for most of the season? What is the best lineup with this bunch here? Because it seems like the 8 guys are pretty much going to be everyday players. Very few platoon situations. It seems like the 8 guys are pretty locked.
I think we're pretty clear who's going to be batting where. So to say Hernandez, after getting on base so well last year, he's going to be the leadoff hitter. Howie Kendrick's going to bat behind him. It's batting second. Odubel Herrera then has to slide to bat third, and again, as we just mentioned, his high batting average will make him a good fit there for now. Maikel Franco is likely your cleanup hitter, batting fifth. Now, I think what they're going to do is they're going to bat Saunders fifth, and then Joseph sixth to break up the 2 right-handed hitters, and then that means seventh you're going to have the catcher Cameron Rupp, and then Freddy Galvis will be your 8-hole hitter before the pitcher. I don't think we're going to see any pitchers batting 8th this year.
Something that we have seen in the past. How about that rotation? Who is slotted behind Jeremy Hellickson in the 2 through 5 spots?
Yeah, so they're going to give Clay Buchholz and Jeremy Hellickson the veteran priority. So Hellickson's already announced as your opening day starter. Clay Buchholz will be second. Third will be the pretty consistent Jared Eichhoff, although he got beat up a little bit in his last spring start. I don't think that's anything to worry. And then Vince Velasquez and Aaron Nola. I'm not sure they totally set that rotation, who's going to pitch when, but a lot of it depends on their unique situations. I think Nola, they still have some concerns about his elbow. He seems to be okay, but you never know with an elbow injury on a pitcher. So I think they want him towards the end so that they can better take care of that. And Vince Velasquez, we mentioned last season frequently that he needs to be much more efficient in his pitches, where he didn't have an innings limit per se. He had a pitch limit because he was throwing a lot of pitches. And so I think they want to try to manage Velasquez a little bit so he doesn't get himself into any trouble. So I think we might see, if I had to take my guess, I think Nola's going to pitch fourth, which makes him the home opener starter, and Velasquez will be fifth.
Frank, the last couple of years, there's been trade talk around some of the players. Who are the trade pieces the Phillies might have this season?
I don't think they have any major type players to trade. Now, all the veterans pretty much are fair game for trade. Hellickson, we actually learned a couple months ago that the Phillies might have actually had a trade in place for Hellickson last year, but due to some rules after the Padres did not make good on a trade, and the circumstances surrounding that ended up getting the Padres GM suspended. Actually, they didn't get to make that deal. So I think Hellickson is probably your best bet to be traded at the deadline. Every team needs a veteran starter, even towards the back end, like when the Phillies got Joe Blanton in 2008, he could be somebody else's Joe Blanton. Clay Buchholz, if he pitches well, he's a good candidate as well to be traded. And then the two outfielders we just discussed, Maikel Saunders and Howie Kendrick. The Phillies hope that by the trade deadline they have Nick Williams or Roman Quinn or Dylan Cousins, beating down the door and necessitating a promotion, in which case, that would be an easy time to flip the switch for them. And veteran bats like theirs are always very helpful on teams, even if they're not going to be starters wherever they go. The contenders always like a player like that. Even if it goes into August, they might find trade partners for those players as well. But the bullpen pieces they picked up, Pat Neshek and Joaquin Benoit, both of them have actually been traded around the deadline in their careers. They're veteran pieces that really stabilize a bullpen. Some of the Phillies' young arms seem ready to come up and take a spot in the bullpen. The Phillies could move them as well. So none of those players really will necessarily give the Phillies a big return. I think what they would try to do is they would try to beef up their talent at Class A and really see if they can move ahead some of the ones in the system already.
You mentioned a few prospect names there, Nick Cousins, Hoskins, Roman Quinn. So which prospect, Frank, do you think is the first one who gets called up?
I'm going to go with Jorge Alfaro. I think the Phillies are going to see that in the first 6 weeks of the season, Alfaro is going to show that he's major league ready. I think from the little bit I saw of him in the World Baseball Classic and in spring training. I think Alfaro could be ready now. I think he's actually more ready than Knapp at the moment, but I think they're committed to letting him play every day at TripleA. And if May 15th or so he's really tearing the cover off the ball and working really well with the pitchers, I can see them finding room for him, even if it means sending Knapp back to the minor leagues. But I think Alfaro is your first prospect to come up. And other than that, you might not see anybody else until the trade deadline, or if there is a major injury where you need to bring somebody up. A 60-day disabled list stint, certainly opens a roster spot for one of the ones not on the roster right now. But the likes of Nick Williams and Roman Quinn are the ones on the 40-man roster. So if you have a short-term injury, you might see one of them for a temporary stay in the major leagues. But I think in terms of like the J.P. Crawfords of the world, you probably have to wait till after the trade deadline, after some players have been traded and some roster spots are opened up.
Frank Klose with us here, 97.3 ESPN.com. He'll cover the Phillies, of course, again for 97.3 ESPN.com. Frank, who's the first player traded?
I'm going to go with Jeremy Hellickson. I think the fact that we know that he was indeed as good as traded last year before it got kind of wiped out with those rules issues. I think Hellickson is going to be valuable to somebody. I don't think he's a superstar by any means, but I think he's that solid rotation piece that every club is going to need. Whether you're a contender or trying to stay in the race. So I think he's going to have some value for somebody. And I think somebody like him, he's good for a good Class A prospect.
If the Phillies had a Cy Young award winner, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they would like to see one of the young pitchers step up and get it. My view is I think it'll be Jared Eichhoff who's going to give them the best performance. I think Eichhoff, he's not the overwhelming pitcher in terms of velocity, but he's a smart pitcher who knows how to mix pitches. I think he's going to give them 6-7 innings out almost every time he pitches. And I think he would be the one that's really going to be that steady hand in this rotation. I still think you're going to see from Nola. I think he's still got some ups and downs in him. Again, hopefully his injury is not going to be a concern. But Velasquez, I think, too, he will have his moments, but I think he's also going to have some times where he struggles with his pitch efficiency. So my money is on Eichhoff.
All right, Phillies MVP is?
Again, a tough one. Let's see here. Maybe I would give that to Maikel Franco. I think that extra lineup protection that he has now and the fact that the lineup is going to function more like a major league lineup this year will really help him settle in with not only more RBI opportunities with people on base ahead of him, but with more protection behind him. I think he's going to see more pitches to hit, and I think we're going to see his average and his runs batted in and OPS all improve.
So, Frank, let's get some numbers out of you. How many wins do you think the Phillies get this season?
Now, I have the Phillies at 76 wins with a big asterisk. I think this season we're going to see what we saw last season, where the middle of May, we're talking, and the Phillies are tied for first place for an afternoon. I think that they're going to hang in there a little bit in the beginning before they fade a little bit. A lot will depend on whether or not they're able to trade some of these players. When they start trading off assets, you might have a little bit of a rocky period with the new people coming in. So let's say you get to July 31st and they're a 500 ball club, and they do make a couple moves, and next thing you know, you have Nick Williams and Roman Quinn every day all of a sudden. Well, that's the first time either of those players are doing that in the major leagues, and it might take them a little while to get going. So I could see a drop off after the deadline when Jeremy Hellickson is replaced with somebody like Zach Eflin or Jake Thompson, who again very limited experience. So I'm going to say 76, but I think that 76 is going to be a number that looks worse than the progress is actually made. I think that's a really good 76. I think that's because the next round or the next class of players are rising up. And I think that leaves them in a much, much better place than they did last season.
Yeah, some people wonder, Frank, if this is even the best Phillies team in the organization, if maybe their AAA or AA teams might be better than the big club.
Yeah, AAA is really stacked right now. Their outfield of of Williams, Cousins, and Quinn probably a very strong outfield, the strongest in AAA. You look to their infield, they're going to have Hoskins at first base. They're going to have Crawford at short. They're going to have Yasmiel Valentin at second base. And then behind the plate, they have Alfaro to start. I mean, these are all players that really do have a chance at a major league job. So, not many AAA clubs are often filled with former major leaguers, kind of on the bubble, but they have a really deep AAA team this year. And how well they do depends on how soon the Phillies raid them.
All right, Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, all season long with us here with the mailbag on Tuesdays at Frank Klose on Twitter. That's Klose with a K. And don't forget Sports Talk Philly for all of the Phillies coverage they bring for this Phillies baseball season. That's sportstalkphilly.com. And, of course, Frank with us here on 97.3 ESPN. Great preview, Frank, and opening day. We love it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Looking forward to talking baseball with you all season.